Could you tell people out there who you are?
Yeah, sure. I am Talal, a freshly graduated medical doctor planning on getting specialized in psychiatry. I consider myself that this is my passion that I want to pursue. I'm very interested in it, very interested in helping people, not only in the psychiatric field, but in the whole mental health and life improvement and life development field. And I also have a life coaching calling service where I offer people live calls on Zoom for anyone that kind of has any kind of struggle in life, like mild depression and anxiety symptoms, people who want to find their purpose in their life, who suffer from addictions maybe, or just generally want someone that help them with improving their lives and developing themselves.
That is very noble of you. So, since you're so interested in mental health, what are the most important things, in your opinion, to maintain and have a good mental health?
That's an excellent question. So, I would say there are 5 points or 5 factors for good mental health. The first factor is good physical health.
Right.
You know, it's very hard for someone to have a bad mental health while still maintaining a good physical health, and vice versa.
Almost impossible.
Almost impossible. Bad physical health will definitely, in a way or another, make your mental health suffer.
Right.
So by physical health, we talk about things like a healthy diet, exercise, good sleep hygiene, drinking enough water, etc. The second point is kind of having a purpose or a meaning in your life, like striving for something higher, working on something meaningful in your life. The third point is having healthy, meaningful social relationships. The fourth point would be having a meditation habit, specifically mindfulness meditation, where you kind of get used to, leaving your daily life in a way, like leaving your overthinking pattern and kind of, for 5 to 10 minutes a day minimum, just focus on one thing, that's your breath, and kind of be mindful of your environment. The fifth point that's very interesting is having a very specific type of diarying habit that helps you identify negative thoughts.
Right.
And try to, over time, replace these negative thoughts by positive thoughts. What do I mean by this? Human beings, or every human being, has around 50,000 thoughts a day. And 99% of my today's thoughts are the same as yesterday's thoughts. And a lot of these thoughts, unfortunately, are negative. And unfortunately, again, our brain tends to be more biased towards the negative thoughts. So what I suggest everyone doing, especially the ones that kind of suffer from some sort of mental health issue, to try to sit down every day and just simply write down every thought that comes to mind, both currently and throughout the day, the thoughts that you remember that popped in your mind in that day, over a period of time, over minimum a couple of weeks. And as time goes on, you will start to identify patterns. You will start to identify certain negative thoughts that pop out in your mind over and over again. And the next step will be to try to replace these thoughts by positive thoughts. How do we do this? It's very hard to force yourself to not think about something. The classical example is, if I tell you, don't think of an elephant,
Right.
you will immediately think of an elephant. But if I tell you over and over again, think of a lion, you will eventually think of a lion, forget about the elephant. The same thing goes with the thoughts. So for example, let's say I identified a recurrent negative thought. Let's say it is, I don't deserve love. Okay?
A lot of people have that thought.
Unfortunately, a lot of people have this thought, yes.
Especially these days.
Yes.
Right.
So I identified this negative thought. What I do is I almost forcefully try to implement the opposite positive thought of that negative thought. That is, that I definitely do deserve love in life.
Right.
If I constantly tell myself this positive thought over and over again, or I constantly write this thought down, I will eventually make my subconscious believe in that positive thought instead of the negative thought I had previously. And this will have an immense effect on your mental well-being. You know, I find the topic of the power of thought very, very fascinating. I think humans aren't aware of how powerful thoughts can be. Let me give you two examples of this. The first example is that they made an experiment where they took two groups of people and they told both of the groups to drink a specific milkshake for a week.
This was a Harvard study?
No, I think that was done in Stanford, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So they told the first group that, you know, this milkshake is a very unhealthy milkshake. It's
Right.
very high in fat, very high in sugar, very high in calories. Most likely this milkshake will make you increase weight. They told the second group that this milkshake is very healthy. It's very high in protein, it's very high in fibers, it's very low in sugar, it's very low in fat.
So it's a placebo essentially?
I'm gonna come to this. Yes, it plays with the placebo thing.
Right.
So what they did was they measured an enzyme in the gut that's called ghrelin, or we could also call it the hunger enzyme. Let's just call it the hunger enzyme. So what does the hunger enzyme do? The hunger enzyme increases in our gut once our body feels that we did not get enough calories. So let's say you ate something, but it has not enough calories for you to fulfill your calorie needs. Essentially, this enzyme will stay high and will make you feel hungry still, and basically telling you, you know, you should eat something else or something additional because we are in a calorie deficit. So what they found out is that the group that believed that the milkshake is very low in calorie had a 3 times higher level of this enzyme compared to the group that thought it's an unhealthy milkshake.
That's significant.
Even though we were talking about the same milkshake.
Same milkshake, right.
So it's fascinating to see that the thought could actually have measurable physiological effects on the body.
Of course.
It's absolutely mind-blowing. The second example I always like to talk about is that they went to a hotel, a very, very big hotel, where a lot of housekeeping wives work. So, you know, it is a big hotel and these housekeeping wives were moving a lot. They were going up and down stairs, they were changing sheets all day, they were carrying things all day, and they definitely were working out enough every day. But no one actually believed in this. They asked the housekeeping women, do you think you move enough per day? Most of them said no. We don't really move that much.
Even though they work at a hotel and they move around all the time.
Yes, but they were just not believing this. They were thinking that it was just not enough for them to maintain the, you know, minimal like moving requirement that's, you know, suggested by, for example, the American Heart Association. So what they did was they split these housekeeping women into two groups. They didn't tell the first group anything. They went to the second group and really made them believe that, you actually do move a lot. You do exercise more than enough than you would need, and you should lose weight. So before doing that, they took some medical measurements from both groups, like for example weight and BMI and fat percentage and systolic blood pressure and blood sugar levels, etc. And after a month, they repeated these tests, and they found out that the group that started to believe that they were doing enough exercise per day actually had measurable physiological improvements. They lost weight, they lost fat, they had a decrease in the systolic blood pressure by around 10 points on average, even though they weren't moving more than they used to, at least as long as the researchers were concerned, or as far as the researchers were concerned. They weren't working on more rooms, they weren't like doing some like extra push-ups or anything, or like no one reported changing their diets. So as you see, again, by just changing your belief, you could reach physiological changes in your body that's measurable. And I always suggest people to implement this in their daily life. For example, what I personally do when I go to the gym and I want to, do a specific exercise, let's say shoulder pull, I put 50 kgs, but I try to literally lie to myself that I actually put 30 or 40 kgs. I visualize this number for around 30 seconds. I really imagine how 30 kilos will look like, and then I do exercise and I notice it's easier and it's more doable for me, even though it's very heavy. Something else I try to do in the gym with my buddies in the gym is that, for example, one of the guys is like in the bench press and he's like, bro, dude, it's too heavy. Could you please remove 5 kgs? I'm like, yeah, sure, I will remove it. But I actually don't remove anything, or sometimes I even add 2.5 or 5 kilos. And suddenly he is able to, to lift because simply he was believing that it became easier. Another thing I'm trying to do in my own personal life, and I also suggest everyone to do this, is that before every exam, I try to really convince myself that this exam is going to be very easy, that I am more than capable of, passing the exam, and I overstudied even. There are also studies and experiments that show that people who enter the exam with this kind of more positive approach or positive beliefs actually would score better, even though there wasn't any significant differences in their preparations. And I could talk about this topic more in my future videos. So generally, this was all talking about the 5th point, which is this diarying thing. You could really, work on your thoughts to significantly improve your mental health.
That is definitely a big point. The power of thought is something people don't study enough and they don't understand enough, I feel.
Yes, because it's not easy to study. We shouldn't forget this.
All we do essentially in neurology is study brainwaves, etc. That is all that we can measure, physically. So we don't really understand it. That is the main point here. So what are the things, now that we talked about things that are important for a good mental health? You said diarying, you mentioned thought patterns, how to break them, etc. Now, what are the things that you think destroy mental health?
Yeah, so the things that destroy mental health are, first of all, basically not doing any of the 5 points I just mentioned. If you reverse one of these...
So you think those 5 points are essential to maintain a good mental health?
I do believe that applying them will make you much less prone of suffering from mental health issues.
Right, but I mean, like, do you think that anyone who does have mental health issues is not following those 5 points?
This is hard to answer because a lot of mental health issues are due to like a very interesting interplay between genetics, the way you grew up, and these points. So I can definitely answer that anyone having mental health issues doesn't do these points, but I do believe that doing these points will make it much less likely for you to suffer from mental health issues.
So you don't think it's essential, like, to maintain a mental health? Like, you don't need those 5 points exactly?
You probably don't need to do all of them. Not everyone that does not meditate, for example, suffers from mental health issues. But I would, for example, believe that any person that has a significant health issue, that, for example, suffers from chronic pain, will definitely have some sort of mental health suffering.
Right. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone has to maintain or implement meditation in their daily life, some sort of meditation at least.
So other things that destroy mental health is, especially for young men, porn and masturbation, especially porn. I think...
Right. It's a big one.
Yeah, I think porn is one of the biggest threats of modern life. It destroys the mental health of, again, especially young men by many ways. The first way is that by watching porn, you get like this incredibly high or like this incredibly big dopamine peak,
right,
without any effort. And then this peak will go down to a trough that's actually lower than the baseline used to be before this peak. So this constellation has two problems. The first problem is, again, you did not put any effort into like getting this dopamine peak. You just simply typed in something into your phone, and this is just not a realistic thing in life. Like, for example, it's very hard to find a sexual partner in real life, but you got used to getting this incredibly high dopamine peak without any effort. This is a problem because you won't be motivated in real life to do anything that has a delayed gratification or a delayed dopamine increase. This is the first big problem. The second big problem is that so after having this dopamine peak and you go to the trough that's below baseline, so someone that went below baseline is gonna ask myself, oh shit, what do I do now? So I need another dopamine peak. So what does he do? He watches another porn or watches porn another time and gets another dopamine peak. But the problem is that the second dopamine peak will be smaller than
the first one.
Right. And after the second dopamine peak, it will go to a trough, and the second trough will be lower than the first trough. And it goes on and on.
Which basically desensitizes your receptors, right?
Exactly, and this is basically the definition of addiction.
Yeah.
So you could become very quickly addicted to porn. And this is, of course, other than you having or you being much more likely to have sexual problems in real life. Because first of all, you're used to getting these dopamine peaks by being the third person, by being the watcher rather than the actor. So when you are in real life and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you're the actor, you're gonna face problems. You will have very unrealistic expectations about your partner, and you will have insecurities about yourself, because even the male bodies in porn are totally unrealistic. You will have unrealistic expectations about the sexual act itself, because everything you watch in porn just simply has nothing to do with real life.
Totally unrealistic.
So I strongly strongly push young men to really abstain from any sort of porn watching.
Right.
About masturbation, I also recommend young men to abstain from masturbation as much as possible. Of course, masturbation to porn is much worse than masturbation alone. But even with masturbation, again, going back to this dopamine pattern, it will make you used to, again, like getting a dopamine peak without putting any effort. So the more you abstain from masturbation, the higher your dopamine baseline overall, and the more motivated you are to, seek like delayed gratification, like for example, seek or like try to find a partner.
Right. Finding something that is actually real versus, looking at something that is not real, something that you're just looking at as a third person instead of doing it yourself. It's a big difference. I think we can all agree on that. Now, what would you say are things that destroy mental health?
So other than, again, the porn that I added to reversing the 5 points that I mentioned previously, the second thing would be social media. By social media, I'm not talking about all the uses of social media. You can use social media platforms for meaningful things, like for example, to spread awareness and to spread knowledge. But I'm talking about this classical use of social media of, posting things and like constantly scrolling through other people's posts. The problem I see here is that I feel social media is just simply a fake world.
Right.
Because the vast majority of people are gonna post their peaks in life.
It's a toxic world.
It's a toxic world,
right.
Because people post their most positive life events.
Right.
There are of course people that are somewhat more balanced about it. They would also post like the normal life events and kind of also
Rarely.
the negative life events. Rarely, but the vast majority of posts you see on Facebook, for example,
Our peaks.
Our peaks, like
right.
our marriages and graduations and past exams. I'm much more likely to post about an exam that I passed than an exam that I failed. So the average person is gonna sit there in his house having a very normal life situation, scrolling through Facebook and seeing all these positive life events, and he's gonna ask himself, why am I not that successful? Why am I not happy? This will make him sad, and this will make him jealous, and this is a problem.
Right, 100%. So now that we live in this sort of world with social media, we somehow have to sort of deal with it, you know what I mean? So how do humans in today's world maintain that happiness that you were talking about with the aspect of social media, with the aspect of seeing everyone else scrolling, for example, through TikTok or whatever it is? How can humans be happy and still implement and live a modern, sort of balanced life?
Okay, so before answering this question specifically, I would like to refer to something I at least call social minimalism, where I am trying to point out to the belief, or to my belief, that with social connections, it's all about quality rather than quantity.
Right.
Let me give you 2 scenarios. Let's say I have 3 very close friends, okay? Only 3. But these 3 friends I am very close to. I am very transparent with them. I can be my true self with them. I share with them all of my secrets, all of my worries, all of my problems. And I really feel they have my back, and they would at least try to help me as much as possible. And
right.
I am trying to do the same thing for them. Versus the second scenario where, I have maybe 50 friends. But they're all kind of superficial, meaningless relationships. I don't really share anything with them.
Right.
We might meet up from time to time, hang out, talk about superficial things, and that's it. I think the vast majority of people would agree that the first scenario is better, where deep, meaningful relationships matter more. And these are just hard to, maintain over social media. You could use social media platforms to find friends, of course, but maintaining friendships over social media is, in my opinion, very hard. And by the way, around this like meaningful social relationships, I always like to refer to one of my favorite studies that I ever read. It's a study that was done by Harvard University, where they took around 300 men and they followed them up over their lifetime for up to 80 years with trying to answer the question, what makes human beings actually happy and healthy? It's an incredible study where they included people of various kind of social backgrounds, and they had people that were very disadvantaged socially. They had also like a US president on the other hand.
Oh, wow.
So they had a whole spectrum of people.
Right.
And the only thing they found that increases the happiness of a human being was, again, healthy social relationships of any kind. A lot of people would think it only has to be romantic relationships, but that's not true. You could also maintain happiness and healthiness in your life, or health in your life, by maintaining true healthy relationships with, for example, your siblings, your friends, your parents, etc.
Right. So now that we talked about social bonds, relationships, etc., how do you think people would approach a relationship that goes deeper than just, something that is you would consider a friendship, maybe a marriage, or something that's more like a relationship between a man and a woman? How would you exactly define a successful bond or marriage?
Yeah, this is a very important question.
Right.
In
Especially
human
today.
beings' life. How do we find and maintain a successful romantic relationship or a successful marriage? Here I always suggest 2 points, but before talking about these points, I would like to point out that these results or this answer isn't based on personal experience. It's based on my readings. I really looked into this topic a lot. I went through it in depth. It's based on my readings, my research, and talking to a lot of people and trying to, notice relationships and marriages around me and trying to find patterns. So the two things that help in having a healthy and successful marriage is, first of all, choose wisely, and second of all, know your own needs and know your partner's needs.
So how do we choose wisely? Because that is something a lot of people struggle with, right?
Yes, how do we choose wisely? So, firstly, I think, you should be attracted to each other.
Right.
I can't see a way of a marriage to start or maintain without this being there. So if you guys are attracted to each other, you should be able to comfortably talk to this person. It would be good if you guys share some common interests. It's important that you guys are able to negotiate and solve problems together.